Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. Keep your relationship fueled up with strategies discovered by couples and experts. Because at Fuel Collective, we believe better relationships will equal a better world. You are about to discover specific insights and tools that cost little or nothing to implement to help you date forever. And now, here are your hosts, a couple who always have a half-packed suitcase and a date night in the calendar, Sammy and Nathan Yeager.
Hello and welcome to Date Forever. In this week's episode, we're chatting about the aggressive asshole, the submissive pussy, the imitative douchebag, and the victimized dick, and why people behave like this and how to evolve. But before we get into that, Sammy, what's been fueling you up this week?
Oh, a very adulty fuel up this week.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So we've had a really big month and a half or so. So our life admin was getting out of control.
Yeah, it was a little bit, wasn't it?
It was looking very neglected. And it was reminding me why I don't like to live reactively. Oh gosh, it's so draining when there's all these little things floating around in the back of your brain that, oh, I need to do that. Oh, I need to do that. And you've got no system or process for keeping track of it. So over the weekend, we had like a really good same page meeting, got our life admin back under control, checked in on our goals for 2022.
Yeah, which have been a little bit neglected.
Yeah, and we did a little update, little track on how we're going. Are we hitting the mark? There's some goals that need some attention. So it was really good to just do like a little autumn reset.
Yeah, it was really good, wasn't it?
Yeah. So if you are new to the show, you may not know, but every year Nathan and I do an annual game plan day where we take a whole day out of our life to get really intentional about the next 365 days. And we run our seasons to the literal seasons. So we have summer, autumn, winter, and spring. And we're in the middle of autumn in Australia at the moment. So March, April, May. And every quarter, so every season, we check in on those big goals. So if you would like some help with something like this, you're hearing that and going, oh, that sounds good. That sounds interesting. We spent the better part of a decade trying to figure this out, how to do this well. The process has evolved for us a lot. But basically, we center these goals around the 8 different fuel tanks and keeping those different areas of our life topped up. And if you would like to swipe our agenda, template, tools, checklists, all of the things.
So you don't need to recreate it yourself.
You can do that at fuelcollective.com.au/AGP. And that AGP stands for Annual Game Plan.
But just a reminder too, that you can do this at any time of the year. Just because it's not right at the beginning of the year doesn't mean that you can't start now.
But yeah, that definitely fueled me up this week, seeing how much progress we've already made for the year, seeing what needs some attention, and then just some tactical stuff of like who's going to do what and how are we going to get this done.
Yeah.
What about you? What fueled you up this week?
Well, that was going to be mine as well. But the other thing that we did was do a bit of planning for a holiday that we've got coming up. We're a trip in a couple of weeks' time. So we haven't really taken a trip or actually had a holiday since...
Oh, it's scary. Don't say it out loud.
I know. It ends in a 9, 2019. And so, yeah, it's been really challenging to kind of look forward to something and know that it's actually going to go ahead. But I think we're pretty confident at the moment that the little trip we've got planned is actually going to go ahead. So, yeah, it was nice to just kind of check in with that over the weekend and make a little bit of progress towards doing something fun.
Yeah, it's so nice to have something to look forward to.
Yeah, it definitely is. But now, here's this week's guests.
Today we've got David Coates and Corey Kilpack joining us. They are the co-authors of Be Less Dickish, the definitive self-help book about men. David is a psychotherapist who has been practicing for nearly 20 years in the Bay Area. Corey is David's former client, and together they created a powerful and original book that stampedes the self-help genre. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Well, what a title, Be Less Dickish.
Yeah, Be Less Dickish. So much of the self-help genre, it wants you to be something like, hey, we want to help you be more compassionate, or we want to help you to be a better listener. And for me, the book, we oriented around this notion of, hey, just notice the things you do that aren't working for you and engage them. Do a little bit less of what you do and experiment with that. So I thought it was a fun angle to take on self-help, is just instead of trying to be more of something, just do a little less of certain things and see what happens.
Yeah, I love that. So Corey, you were David's client. Tell us a little bit about how you ended up in his office.
This is a hell of a story. So I was given Dave's name by my ex-wife, unusually. So, and I called Dave up and I said, hey, I need to talk to someone. I'm in kind of a pickle and maybe you could help me find someone. And I told Dave, I said, clearly you're not the guy. Like, I am not coming to see you based on where I got this reference and contacts that we had. I said, there is no chance I'm going to do this with you. I'm ready for a deep dive. And Dave waited about a week and called me back and he said, look, give me a shot. Just give me one shot. Come in and see me one time. You don't think it's a good fit? We'll figure something out, but just give me a shot. And he wasn't far from my house. I could walk to where he was. He was in an office above a place that had burritos that I liked. And so I went and we stuck it out and we continued on that ride for about 7 years.
Oh, wow.
Amazing.
So Corey, what was going on in your life at that time that you were like, oh, I need some help?
I was a mess at the time. There's no question about it. I had conflicts in life. I was trying to figure out what to do. I was leaving a career. I had issues at home, issues like with my own actions and behavior. I had been working on Wall Street for 14 years, and that was coming to an end. And there was a lot of grief, a lot of loss, a lot of bad choices, a lot of confusion going on, and just too much to sort out on my own. I went to Dave, and we just plowed through it over 7 years or so. Right?
What I would love to know is, how did the two of you bridge the relationship from patient, doctor, to friends and co-authors? Like, what was that transition like?
You're assuming we have.
That's true. That's true. I am assuming that you have.
Yeah.
I can speak about Corey in different kind of phases of my life, but working with Corey was one of the most profound experiences for me as a clinician. And just as a man, like, there was something so powerful about working with Corey in my office and the journey that we went on together. And it was just profound. And Corey wrote all the time to me. I said, listen, you need to let it rip. There was so much going on inside. So he would send me emails. That was part of our dynamic. And then we kind of shifted. He was like, I think I'm good. He'd come back. I'd see him maybe once or twice a year the last couple of years. But a relationship like that, it's interesting being a clinician because you're so in it with people and then they're kind of gone, right? That's part of the nature of the beast. And I remember maybe a year later, we hadn't talked. We'd email now and then. And I went to his farm and we just had dinner. Just, how you doing? And I was deep in this book. And then about a year later, I just kept thinking of Corey, like, couldn't finish the book. I was too lost in the model. I couldn't complete it. And I had this ethical dilemma because it's not something I really should have done. It's not something that I really should have done. And if you listen to what the literature says, for a variety of reasons. And I just could not do it. He was the guy, and I knew he was the guy. And I'd read his writing, and his writing was very similar in tenacity to the book and the book's concepts. So I just said, fuck it. I went with my instinct, and I sent him a copy of the book. And he and his wife read it on a road trip. And you can take it from there, Corey, like, he was in. But maybe one of the hardest parts of writing a book with him is I always kind of held you, Corey, in that way of like, I love you, man. Like, I want to support you in your process. But here you are now coming into the book that I had written, coming in the way that you come in, which is full throttle. So I was spun out a lot in the process working with the book. Like, I was triggered a lot because of that conflict between wanting to be like the supportive person that I was for Corey for so long. And also, like, my fucking book is like, I'm losing control of my book and I can't quite tell, wait, Corey's adamant about this piece. And he's so adamant that I can't even tell what the hell I think about this piece because he's so adamant, right? So that was a big part of the learning for me in the book, is like how to find my center in this relationship with a former client who's fucking smart and passionate and clear with what he thinks and wants all the time. And I'm kind of slow and a Libra and like always taking in things from every different perspective. So that was a big part of it for me, is like finding my own clarity and like reforming this relationship with Corey, which I think we're still in the process of doing it in this post-book era. So I don't know that many people have had that experience, but it was rich and it was hard.
When I got the copy of the manuscript, Dave was, leading up to that, one of the most important and powerful people in my life. And I've had some really good influences and amazing friends that are, will carry on for my whole lifetime. Dave was one of those. And getting to a point when he sent me the manuscript, and I had to come to the realization, like I saw it and I knew, like, all right, this train, like there's no stopping it now. This is no longer an option. I have the vision for what this needs to be or can be. And here, we're going to do this. Like, it's going to happen. And Dave and I had to figure that out. Like, we had to be partners in a business. We had to be partners in building something that was a book. We had to let stuff go. We had to negotiate with each other. And it was tough. It took work, but it was fascinating.
So the title of your book is Be Less Dickish. So how on earth did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, I started out, I heard these words a lot in my therapy practice. Like, people curse a lot in therapy. And they also use words like, oh, my boss is such an asshole, or I just felt like such a pussy, right? Or that guy's such a douchebag. So I started asking men, like, what do you mean when you're using these terms? I started using them as kind of entry points. And that got me really curious about the power of them, because they're so charged.
Yeah.
So you've gone about trying to diagnose the characteristics of a dick, an asshole, a pussy, a douchebag.
Yes.
I just wanted the opportunity to say all those words on our show. So I have the book. I haven't finished it. I'm at the beginning. So I understand that you've got these 4 kind of characters or these archetypes. Can you tell us a little bit about how you even came up with the framework for the book?
Yeah. I was writing the book solo for about 6 or 7 years. And I started out with 16 of these terms. And I kept trying to narrow it down to what are the core ones? And what are the ones that are the most common, pack the most punch? So that's how I started with it initially, is which words have the most power? Which words have done the most destruction to me? I got called a pussy all the time when I was a kid, and it was super upsetting. And then I started calling other people pussies. And then it made me feel like I was less of a pussy because to me, it was the essence of the words were what are the main ones that feel like they have the most power? I really wanted to transform all that negativity and pain and trauma into something positive. Let's do something good with these words. Let's face them head on.
What Dave and I tried to do when we started writing this book together, because Dave had done most of the legwork for 10 years, is try and help define, what is the difference? When you say someone is an asshole, obviously you don't like what they did and how they did it and what it made you feel or experience or what the consequences were. What is the difference between that and being a dick? And as we went through this process to figure it out, we actually learned a lot, and it forced us to really dive and describe what is going on. What happens when you tell someone, I am the fucking victim and it is your fucking fault. And when you say it like that, you're like, hey, I don't like the way that feels. But it's happening on a subtle basis in relationships all the time. And it's happening in institutions all the time. And what Dave and I were trying to do is just say, well, what the hell is it? What is it? What are you really trying to say when you call someone a dick or you feel like they just accused you of hurting them when you may not have done it?
So what is it about guys in particular that makes them portray these things? And are these traits more reflective of the person saying the insult or the person receiving the insult?
It takes both. One can exist alone. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. And I think that's why this is such a great conversation for your podcast and for the work that you guys are doing, is that all of these names require a relationship of some kind. It may be a really fucking dysfunctional one, but it requires some kind of relationship, including the conditions that are being sent back and forth between the people. I look at this model and often reflect on the concept of how we do it to ourselves and compartmentalize. Like in some situations, I might be an asshole. In another situation, I might act like more of a pussy. And in other situations, I might just fake it and imitate and bro it out. And, there's different ways that we do that individually. But always in all of those compartmentalized situations, there's an interaction with another human, another person, or another system, or whatever it is that I'm establishing those relationships and making my move and figuring out how I'm going to interact and what skills it's going to take.
And probably the most dangerous one is that relationship with yourself. Like if you're calling yourselves those names or those things and that's what you're internalizing, then there's a whole bigger dynamic there too.
Yeah. But in the book, we're writing this, like we're putting these words on the damn page and we're trying to describe like what is happening in this person's head. Like what are they saying to themselves? And trying to communicate that back is tough. And Dave is the narrator of the book. He's an author of the book and he's a character in the book. And he's also talking to himself. So it's a shit show to try and put this in there, right? But as we get to this concept of the pussy, Dave and I were looking at the book one day and we're like, damn, half this chapter's in italics. And we use italics to represent the person talking to himself. And Dave and I are like, I don't know if the reader's going to understand this. Like this guy's talking to himself all the time. A lot of this conversation and a lot of these conditions are being set by the person on themselves. And it's not unique to the pussy. The douchebag is doing it. The dick is doing it. The dick is telling himself, I am the victim. Like you have to work with me and understand that I'm the victim of what you did to me.
So, Dave, you said you were writing the book for like 6-7 years before the two of you paired up. But what was the problem that you were seeing? Like, what's the thing that you're trying to solve with this book?
I want these words to mean something significant. I don't want them to be throwaway insults. I hope that this book hits the collective. And when we hear those words, that they actually mean something instead of just being used as like insults to ourselves or other people. Let's face our worst in order to become our best. And to me, these words and how they're used and the energy behind them represent such this sort of intensity in these 4 different kind of extremes. So, one way we break it down is like, hey, when you're triggered, where do you go? You're going to go to one of these 4 quadrants if you're not centered.
We've heard you talk a little bit about the trace method. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. That's the T in trace is triggered. And we say, well, most of the time when you're triggered, you just react in these habituated ways. You triggered, you react. And most people don't examine that. They just live their lives stuck in this triggered and reaction cycle. And you bring in ACE, awareness, curiosity, and experimentation, something new is possible. So that's kind of the action piece of the book. That's the transformational part of the model. And we want people to be interested, like, hey, where do you go when you're triggered? Like when your partner is disappointed in you, where do you go? Like, do you kind of collapse? That's the pussy response, right? And pussy, we go back and forth about that word because it's such a charged word, but it is the word that men use, at least in the States. That is the fitting word. And so do you go into this sort of like selfless, conscientious state? Oh, how's she doing? Is she mad at me? Is he mad at me? What do I need to do to make them okay with me? I'll do whatever I can because the only way I can feel better is if she's okay with me, right? Like that would be kind of an extreme response to a partner's anger, like a collapse, right? And a dick response would be like, why are you mad at me? I didn't do anything. You're doing something to me. Like you did something to me. I'm the victim of what you did. And a douchebag response might be, it's all good, baby. Like, what are you sweating? Like, there's no problem here. Kind of a very dismissive response to the experience your partner's having, right? Very douchey. And then, of course, asshole is like the hammer. Fuck this, fuck you, like selfish, shameless in response. So that's the basic model is like, we want you to pay attention to when you're triggered. And everybody goes to these 4 quadrants. Everybody does at different times. Some go to more extreme places than others. But you're going to spin out to one of these 4 areas. And that's one of the major premises of the book. And we want you to be curious about that.
So can I get you to recap? So we've got trigger, reaction.
Yep. Awareness, curiosity, and experimentation.
Okay. I love it. This is such a great model.
Yeah. So you put the ACE in the trace.
And I think it's important we talk about TRACE and you look at it, not just an acronym. And the book breaks it down. Like, what does this mean? And one of the most important parts of that is, what in the hell is a trigger? And we use it as a verb. We use it as a noun. We really use it when we're acting like dicks and someone triggered me and it's not my fault because they launched this trigger. And we look at the concept of triggers, like, are they really bad? Do they make us sweat? Do they make us violent? Do they make us just fall asleep and ignore them? Like, what level of trigger is affecting us? And the book goes through great detail to explain that the trigger is just information. It is just information. That's it. You're stuck in traffic. That's your level of information, that you're stuck in traffic. If you decide to lose your shit, that's you losing your shit. But the information was, you're traveling really slow. That's the information. And Dave has a great method that he's prepared, which helps people identify the information and not lose their shit and see the difference with what they do in these 4 quadrants that can dial it back and help you stay in the game without being a lunatic.
And I guess that's really where that awareness piece comes into it. Once you're aware that you are triggered by something, and then you actually have the ability to be able to then notice that and then get curious about it, start exploring what might actually be behind that or why you might be reacting the way you are reacting.
Yeah, what's fascinating about it is to teach and write about the concept of awareness and curiosity and experimentation. We're looking at this as an archetype and a model and a personality, but it's all just a model, right? You have to apply it in real life. You need to be curious. If you spent your life as a pussy and you can't even decide when and how you're going to take a piss without getting someone's permission, you have to be curious about what it's like to be more assertive. It can't be limited just to your own submission. Like, that concept of being curious means you got to cross the lines a little bit here and see what it's like on the other side. And it doesn't mean you all just line up and sign up for a fight club and go like find a guy that looks like Meatloaf and beat him up. But you have to be able to learn what's happening and be curious what your other options are. That's the kind of the background of TRACE.
Yeah. I'm making this observation as a early 30s white woman, but I feel like the messaging that men receive is so mixed. Like, be hard, be strong, be a protector, be like all of these different things that are quite in contrast of one another, like polarities, in the same way that women are asked to be soft and tender, but then be brave, and all of these kinds of really conflicting ends of spectrums of, I guess, traits. But I feel like it's created so much confusion, and then we throw the gender spectrum in amongst that and everybody sits on that somewhere. But I really do feel like what men's role in a relationship is very confused at the moment. And I feel like the generations before us, it was very clear cut. It was like, this is the man's role, this is the woman's role. And I don't think that that's the model that we should stick with, but I definitely feel like we're in a couple of generations where we're renegotiating and re-navigating what those roles look like. I would love your insights and thoughts on where we're at with that dynamic of relationships as we move forward.
I mean, I love that inquiry, and I totally agree with you. And I thought about that in the book too. Like, if a man is if he's too assertive, he's an asshole. If he's too vulnerable, he's a pussy. Or if he's too like rah-rah going along with the program, he's a douchebag. Like, to me, these terms can really kind of box, like, how are we supposed to be? Like, any way we are, we're going to get feedback. And you're right, the old ways of being, they don't hold up anymore. And so we are kind of left to go inside and figure out, like, who are we really? Like, what is our relationship to being assertive? What is our relationship to vulnerability? What is our relationship to going along with the crowd versus being in resistance to what's going on? And the book is really a call to, like, hey, explore. Like, it's really interesting. Like, the book is really funny. These words are also really funny in the way that they can be used. Like, it can be a really interesting journey, right? And you can find out what's true for you. And I think that was my main motivation. And that's what I've certainly done as a clinician. It's like, hey, let's figure out what's really true for you. right? When you're not doing these other things, when you're not spinning out in these quadrants, when you're more centered, because the book says, like, how do you come back from the perimeter of behavior of these 4 guys and like find your center, find out what's really true for you? And like Corey and I are really different men. We're really different kinds of men. And that's been part of our process together, is like Corey's a lot more kind of assertive than I am naturally. Like Corey's like fearless warrior, like, and it inspires me. And I have a nervous system that at a certain point is like, whoa, that's too intense, right? Like, so we've got really different ranges of expression. And that's part of what we got to work through in writing the book together, is like, I'd have to go sit down in another room working with Corey sometimes, because there's a level of
it's funny, even the keyboard sounds different when we were working on one computer. Like the keyboard, like I'm like, bam, it sounds like this, and then Dave gets on. Yeah, and Dave gets on there and he's moving the mouse. I'm like, fuck that. Like, let's go. Like, we got to rock and roll. Cut it. Just let it go. Cut it. Yeah, it's completely different. So there's a lot of me in the book and a lot of Dave in the book. And I grew up in a home that was broken and families were broken, and there's a lot of addiction and a lot of violence. And, my mom did a hell of a job to raise her sons and her kids. And there's kids all over in my family. My mom remarried when I was probably about 9. So I have a little brother and sister and stepbrothers and sisters, and I got adopted. Like, it's a mess, but it's our family. And there's a lot that went into that, and a lot of contributions from a lot of different people. But there was still some stuff that I wish didn't happen along the way. And we look at this now as we're writing this book, like we're going to put this self-help book and tie all this in and look at these generation difference and communities that are different and socioeconomics that are different. And how do we incorporate all that? And our solution was, hey, let's break this down into things that are common to all of these across the generations. And so people can see what it is that they're doing and what they're choosing. Like, keep it really simple so people can understand. No one is saying to one generation, hey, you need to be like the boomers. You need to be like the cleavers. What we're saying is, all right, you need to go on this ride and take your own adventures and figure out how the hell you're going to do it and make your choices of what matters and what's important. And when we talk about triggers, we're saying to someone, here comes the information. Whether it's information like your question, which is, what do you want to be and how do you want to be? Or here comes an event or an action. There's a point where you decide who is the priority in what I'm about to do. Am I going to do this for me, or am I going to do it for us? Am I going to do this just for me or for the whole group? And it's not always the same answer for the same person. But at some point, you got to think, am I looking out for me right here or the group? And that's really basic, and nothing's wrong. Like, there's nothing wrong about that. Like, you can't choose you and be wrong. You can't choose the group and be wrong. But you also have to say, am I going to make this decision and be fully aware and conscientious of everyone around me and the consequences to everyone else? And what are they going to think of me? And what am I going to think of them? And what are the effects going to be of my choices? Or am I going to do what I need to do? And I don't give a fuck. Like, I'm about to do this and it's the right move and I'm making it. That's what we're doing. Or I'm going to make this move and I don't even know like, if you're an asshole, it's not that you don't care. You don't even know. Like, it's not on your fucking radar, right? And so what we've done to address like some of these differences in perspective is just say, hey, break it down to something simple. Like, what's your priority here? And how can you be in a relationship if you don't even know what the fucking priority is? Like, at some point, you got to be like, what am I trying to do? What am I building here? And the model is just that simple. And all of these characters, like the asshole, he's selfish and he's shameless. It's that simple. It is that simple. And what happens when you live your life only being selfish and only being shameless? You're going to hurt someone and you're going to fucking hurt them bad.
Yeah. I was thinking about you guys and your podcast and listening to Corey. there are times where you guys make yourself the priority in your relationship. Like, I need to do something for me right now. I'm going to go away for a weekend because I need to do that. And then there are times that you choose, like, I'm going to make the relationship a priority. And I think that's what Corey was getting at. And that reminded me of, like, yeah, you have to date yourself. You have to make yourself a priority sometimes. And other times you have to make the relationship a priority, and you have to kind of listen. It's a dynamic, responsive way of being in a relationship. And you guys are really committed to that. Which is one reason your podcast is cool. Like, you're saying it has to be both.
It's not much fun being in a relationship with someone who's like, fuck you, I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want all the time. Right.
Right. But if your partner never said that, they'd be a lot less interesting of a partner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if they were available and did everything you ever wanted all the time and never put themselves first, that's not a desirable partner either.
Yeah. And that's the sort of thing that we break down, is like, it's so easy to leave relationship when we're triggered. And when you're spun out, when you're triggered, it's a leaving of relationship. And it's often a leaving of relationship with yourself. So
we built this model around whether or not you're selfish and whether or not you're selfless and whether or not you're shameless and whether or not you're conscientious, and ended up with all of these awesome, cool, vulgar words. But we had to, and it came naturally. We weren't forcing this in. We have to define, like, what is the extreme combination of these options, and what is the balanced and centered combination? And one of those combinations is, hey, you got to take care of yourself. That's selfish. And you have to care, conscientious. And we were like, what do you call that? What is it called when you do that? And it's called self-care. And we put it right there in the middle of the damn thing. The book is called Be Less Dickish. And we're not saying to people, don't be selfish and don't be selfless and don't be any of these. It really is, if you look at it, we're telling people, take care of yourself a little bit better. Like, do that well. And if you can do that well, you'll be able to see your other options and what is happening to you. But as long as you're not taking care of yourself, you're subject to the whims of everyone else's control and everyone else's spun out bad behavior and all the triggers of the world and the height of the oceans and the temperature in Antarctica. Like, you can find anything to be pissed off about and be pissed off for a long time. And we're saying, like, yeah, like, stick to yourself so you are available. Without doing it, you're not available. You're just a spun out pain in the ass.
Yeah. Hey, guys, you're obviously here on a show about relationships. And Nathan and I, one of the things that we say a lot is that our relationship with ourselves sets the tone for every other relationship that you have or that I have. But what I would love to know is, what do the two of you do to take care of your own relationship with yourself?
All right. I'll go first on this one. I like to build things, and I like to have things that I build that are independent, like I do it on my own, and I like to build things with a few other people. I'm not a good employer in every case, and I've worked independently and been self-employed for most of my adult life. But that's what I enjoy, is like I like being on the ground, doing stuff, watching the progress, feeling the progress. And it doesn't matter so much what it is. Like, 1 year I spent just working on Lamborghini tractors. Another year I spent just building a software solution for a mechanical engineering problem that I discovered. And 1 year I spent writing a book with Dave. So like, there's things that I do that I will just dive into with a lot of passion. And I think that is something I've had to embrace. People around me have had to embrace, like, hey, when I turn that on, we're going all the way. We're taking it all the way to the end. And that's what I do. It might be a hobby that lasts a year. It might last 2 years, but when I go all the way.
Yeah, I love that. So what about you, David?
I'm the opposite. Like, I get really still. I like to meditate. I like to just reflect. I like to write. Mine is just kind of a much more like internal process. And I like to just sort of like track how I'm doing, like noticing how I'm responding to life in the different ways it shows up. So I'm by nature just more of a contemplative kind of guy. And so for me, just really slowing down, like getting quiet.
So I just want to change focus a little bit and talk about the relationship that the two of you built together. it is often difficult for guys to make friends and to build those really deep relationships. So can you just talk to us a little bit about that?
All the time I was writing to Dave and going to see Dave when I was his client, I had a core group of friends that were all dudes. We would go do a trip to New Orleans, or we would go do a trip to the ranch or something. But we stayed in touch almost daily between someone in the group, this core group of guys. And they've been a profound influence on the book. And a few of them contributed or mentioned in the acknowledgments, but these kind of relationships help us to give a dialogue about ourselves. Like, I think that's one of the most important things about this relationship with other men and friends outside of your intimate relationship is you get to practice some of these thoughts and shit that you're thinking in a way that's just normal. Like, you don't, and it doesn't have to be permanent. Like, you're just trying it out if you have to, but you get feedback that helps you make a better decision.
So many of the men I see in my practice, they don't have good male friends and they suffer. They only have their families.
Yeah, so I do know that it can be really challenging for adult males to make other adult male friends as well. So how can we go about trying to build some of those really strong relationships with other guys?
I love that question. I've had amazing male friends in my life, and I still do. And to me, someone's got to kind of make the move. Someone's got to kind of say, I like you. Like, I like hanging out with you. I like this. Like, I want more of this. And there's a vulnerability in that, right? That's not what we're supposed to do. But like, if I meet a man that I'm really drawn to, like, I'll say that, like, listen, I'm drawn to you. I want to explore, like, I want to see where friendship goes with you. Like, I'll be overt about that. In the same way that I would be, if I was interested in a woman, I'd be clear, because it's so important to me to build those friendships. So that's the way I do it. Like, I'm always looking for like my people, right? And I can kind of tell pretty soon after, like, oh, wait a minute, here's an opportunity. And it's those kind of people that you can have a real conversation with right away. I think that's really precious. You know what I'm talking about? Where you meet someone, you're like, wait a minute, something's happening here. Like, and I want people to be on the lookout for that because it's so precious.
Part of being a friend and having a friend is that sometimes you got to give a little. Like, you got to be available to your friend. And no matter who it is, man or woman, it doesn't matter. You got to be available. And you have to like give yourself up a little and not be so caught up in everything your friend does. Like, one of my best friends tells me, like, hey, if you give everyone 3 passes, like find 3 things that they do, and just say, all right, that one I'm going to let you have, and it's not going to bother me. And 1 and 2 and 3, right? And he's basically saying, like, don't be so wrapped up and conscientious about what another person does. Like, give them 3 shitty attributes, the worst fucking things you can imagine. I don't care. And let them have it. Like, let them own it. And then just get more attached or interested in the 4th thing they do or whatever. But the section of the book where we deal with this is actually in the concept of the douchebag. The douchebag is selfless. He has abandoned his true self to wear a costume and look like something or someone else. And he doesn't give a fuck. He is going to dress this way, look this way, say these words, and be this guy because he thinks that's what you want him to be. And we're saying, all right, that's kind of cool. Like, that's a good skill. Like, great. But just dial the damn thing down a little bit. Like, just bring it into the center. Like, you can still be someone that other people want to be with and look like they want to be with. And you can still be not all wrapped up and conscientious about yourself, your true self and someone. But come on, like, climb down the fucking ladder a little bit. And the concept of that is, you've got to be of service to someone else. And if you can't take care, like abandon yourself a little bit for someone else and give a little bit and give a little bit to the team, you're not going to be a friend because you're not fucking available. You're either so wrapped up in yourself that you're not available, or you don't even notice the other people. And so the concept of service is the connection that lets you at some point be a friend and have a friend. And without it, you're not available. Like, you're lonely. And you look at the concept of service, and I grew up in a religious background, and we'd have specific service projects. Like every month we'd go do something. And a lot of that is lost. I mean, today it's like, the best thing you could do right now is like your friend's shit on
thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, Instagram or whatever. Like, I don't know, right? And we're saying like, no, get out of the house and do something for someone. Then you'll make friends. You'll be a friend. But part of the start is to be someone's friend and be that guy.
And none of these guys that we really lay out in the books in such detail, they're not available for real connection. All of these guys, these are failures of connection, and these are strategic ways of orienting in the world. And there's no there when you're an asshole, right? There's no connection possible with any of these guys. And they're ultimately kind of tragic characters. They get redeemed in the journey of the book, but they're really lonely. They're not connected. Right. You guys' show is about connection with yourself and with your person and how to keep that alive and dynamic. Right. And these ways that we've outlined, and I think we've done it really well, show what happens in the disconnect. You get lost in the narrative. You can't find yourself. You can't connect with other people. You can't make real friends because you're not there. There's no there because you're lost. And we're saying, hey, get interested in that. Get interested in the ways that you're not connected to yourself and other people. You got to explore, you got to dig, and it's not pretty and it's not easy to do, but it's fucking worth it. Change is not easy. What they will tell you in so many self-help podcasts, like none of that stuff really works. In my experience, this is sort of a critique I have in some of the coaching world, but like you've got to go in there and you've got to deal with things you don't like about yourself. So we're saying, hey, you're a pussy. So am I. And so is he. And that's okay. But take a look at it. Quit trying to not be a pussy, or quit beating yourself up for being a pussy, or try to pose so other people don't think you're a pussy, especially for men, and get interested in what the fuck is actually going on inside of you when you get scared. We're trying to just change that conversation to get people to get curious. And then things start to change and things get interesting. And
connections get better.
Oh my God, connection gets so much better. Connection becomes possible.
Yeah. Something that we talk about on the show of dating forever and yourself and your relationship with your partner. But sometimes dating your partner doesn't look like going for a beautiful romantic dinner. It looks like having an uncomfortable conversation. It looks like leaning into the discomfort of, hey, that thing that you did really hurt me and I'm not sure why, but can you help me figure it out?
Yeah, 100%. Like that is how you keep the relationship going, is you learn, a lot of this about communication, but sharing like, hey, we're off. Like I am pulled back from you and I'm having asshole thoughts about you. Right. And so like, I'm off. I'm not doing well with us and we need to connect around it. And have a partner who'll be like, wow, thank you for letting me know. Fuck yes to that.
Even in that early dating phase of a romantic relationship, like not everything is rainbows and unicorns and everything. Like there is uncomfortable conversations that you have to have in that really early stage as well. And like you're learning lots about your partner and things like that. So why stop doing that later in your relationship?
Listen, I love the idea. I mean, most people are so high on early chemistry that they don't really feel the rub early on. But I love that you guys are taking a stand for that. Like, hey, learn to have these conversations early on, right? Like that's the thing you guys are a stand for.
My recommendation is pretty simple. If people want to date, they've seen each other 2, 3, 4 times. That's the moment right there. 1 chapter a week, you hammer it out together. By the end of 14 weeks of learning about assholes, douchebags, pussies, and dicks,
I love this so much.
And if you had to describe like yourself, like you think about these early stage of a friendship or relationship, like if someone asks you, like, what do you do when the shit hits the fan? What are you going to do? Like, where are you going to go? And you
Which
have
quadrant do you gravitate to?
Yeah. Where do you go? When you're in these relationships and you're triggering each other, that's the point of this conversation in early or late stage, like continuing that dating. Like when you're triggering each other or you're triggered by the other person and you can sit down and say like, all right, this is what it came to me like. It felt like this when you said it. I felt like my options were to go to an extreme option or do something a little bit more in control. or I felt like I had to look out for myself when you did whatever, you broke the dishes, whatever the fuck people do. That just being able to identify it, like this is where it pushed me and this is what I felt like you were doing. It's a fascinating conversation.
And that's all I do in couples therapy. And I do a ton of couples therapy is I'm like, hey, we're going to get you guys interested in what you do together when you trigger each other. And then you're in it together, witnessing it and talking about it. It becomes alive. It becomes a source of energy in the system. We're not caught in it anymore. We're like, whoa, I'm in this part of it right now. Okay, I'm doing my thing. That's right. I know about that thing because I know about that hurt part of you. It's fascinating when you get a couple excited about exploring.
My business partner, one of his favorite catchphrases is, it's really hard to read the label when you're inside the jar. And I think like that's such a great analogy for relationships too, is sometimes like you're so in it that you don't ever get in the helicopter to be like, oh, what was going on there? Because you're just in it. Like get outside of the jar and have those conversations. So guys, you're obviously on a show about relationships. And we talked a little about the relationship that you have with each other, but you've both alluded that you've got your own romantic relationship. So I'd love to hear a little bit about it. Corey, maybe kick us off because your love story is kind of epic.
It is epic. Yep. I'd left the United States and went to Australia. I had a girlfriend back in 1987, so 35 years ago.
I was not even born.
Yes. Way back. Finished school down in Adelaide. Came back to the States and took off and left the country a few more times and kind of went our separate ways with me and Kelly. And I got married and had kids, and she got married and had kids. And those relationships kind of expired. Got to where they were, and we were both single and got married about 5 years ago. Married 4 years ago and met up about 5 years ago. So between us, we have 7 kids and 6 grandkids, and took the business, rebuilt a new business and started a new business and wrote a book together and have been on one hell of a ride for the last 5 years. But it's interesting that Kelly was there when this book arrived. Like when we got the manuscript, Kelly and I read it together, and we read it out loud together all the way to the end, all 100 and whatever 1,000 words. And so we've had it's been a gift. It really has been a gift of seeing this from the beginning and then having to figure out the model and what it looks like and how these characters fit in it. And for Kelly and I, it's been profound because we've had to put ourselves on the chart. Like you've seen the book. If you downloaded it, looked at the website, we're like, where are you on this chart? We'd take this model out to parties and dinner parties with friends. We're like, all right, put yourself on here. When Kelly and I both read this and are experiencing this together, we have to say, like, because we know each other, understands it. Like, what are we doing? Like, what is really going on? And it has been just amazing tool for us. And we still have a lot to learn. I mean, we've known each other for 35 years, but it's an unusual situation. We got a lot to learn about each other. So it's good. It's a good gift.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, isn't it? So how old were you when you first met and dated?
So I met Kelly. I went to an Oingo Boingo concert at the fairgrounds in 1986. We were 16 years old.
Wow. And then you went off and had totally separate lives, separate partners, and then you've come back together. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
So what do you do now? What do the two of you do now to keep your relationship fueled up? Have you got any habits or practices that you do like weekly, daily, monthly?
We got a lot to practice and learn on this one. We're so busy with the company right now that we don't take as much time. But we have kind of a routine. At our last house, we had a hot tub and we would go out there and it was kind of like, you can't look at the phones. It's dark out there. It's away from the house. So you had to walk down the stairs and get away. And it became kind of a crazy routine, like every night. Like this is like our go-to thing that we would do. Everything gets turned off. The lights get turned off. And so we still kind of have that evening routine. Like everything kind of stops and we do something like that. And the thing that I do with Kelly that I enjoy is I process a lot of the things that I'm doing and building and writing and building with her. she was a core part of this group. Wouldn't you agree with that, Dave? Like, she was a core part of the development of the book. And she's been a core part of what we've done with the software business. And even when we were doing infection control and working in hospitals, like, get in the truck, let's go. And she actually transformed our business just with the relationships that she had with the nursing staff. And we would go on site in hospitals and things. So the key for us, and I'm not prescribing this to everyone because everyone has a different path, but the key for us is we have something that we're building together. Like, we have something that we're moving down the road. And even when we were restoring tractors or writing books, there was something that we had together that we were negotiating and building, and we had to meet people and we had to talk to people and introduce what each other was doing in this process to each other. And to me, like, I loved it. It's fun. It's hot. It's interesting. It keeps everything interesting.
I really love that.
Our very first episode was with a guy named Keith Abraham, who is an expert in goal setting. It's his thing. He's been researching it for years. What are the things that drive people to achieve goals? And why do some people do it? Why do some people not? And one of the things that he told us, for couples to be truly happy, they need to have something that they're achieving, that they're making progress on. It's not arriving at the goal that brings the happiness and satisfaction. It's the progress. And it's impossible to make progress if you're not shooting for anything. So Nathan and I are big on goal setting. We always were, but that really amplified how important it is for us to be setting our sights on something that we want to create and build together and continuing to make progress on it.
It didn't matter what we were building. It mattered that we were building something. Your point is something I really endorse and agree with, for sure.
So David, then over to you. What's your relationship status?
I'm not in a relationship right now. So I don't know about much to say about this section.
Well, maybe you can tell us some of the mistakes that you've seen from the couples who come and see you. What are the big ones that we can avoid?
This one I'm passionate about. I see people that really fell in love and then they got really close. And then they got really kind of dependent upon each other. And then I think they started playing really safe with each other, because the more you fall in with someone, the more you are afraid of losing them, the more you have to lose. And so I think one of the biggest problems is people, they subtly stop expressing themselves in the ways that they're afraid it would upset their partner. So there's a diminishment of who they are in the relationship because they want to keep the relationship stable because it means so much to them. And then at some point they realize, like, shit, we've lost the thing that we had. And trying to kind of preserve the thing that we have, we've lost the thing that we have. And I like really looking at it through that lens. What are you not saying? How are you not showing up? Because you want to take care of your partner. Because you don't want to upset your partner. You want to keep the peace. So by keeping the peace, you're sucking the life out of the relationship. That's a big one for me.
Yeah, I think that's so great. I don't think it's something that people always think of, right? That they say, oh, I'm not going to go and spend that weeknight doing that hobby thing because it compromises my time with my partner. Whereas the thing that you leave the house for and go and do is the thing that makes you an interesting human being that I want to hang out with.
Right. And that's partly with the date yourself theme. But most people, if you fall in love with that person, you don't want to hurt them. And so you get careful. And then the relationship turns into something that when there's resentment, then you don't like each other as much as you used to.
Yeah. And I think something that evolves that we've talked about, and we didn't put this in the book, but it's certainly we had a conversation with Dave and I, is you get in this relationship where you start negotiating in a debits and credits model. Like, oh, if you go out, then I have to go out. If you get a diamond ring, then I get a gold watch. Like, metaphorically speaking, right? You start negotiating in the terms of if you, then me. And really, it doesn't have to be like that. You can still get what you want without carrying it around and looking like a checkbook. But you have to stay in the game as yourself. You don't get everything you want, and that's okay.
Well, and I'm going to be me. And if it upsets you, there's space for that, as opposed to I'm not going to be me, and then you're not going to be upset, but then I'm not being me. And then you're not going to want to have sex with each other. Like, that's the ultimate sex killer, is when you're not showing up because you want to be careful with each other. You want to learn to have the hard conversations. Like you were saying, like, you got to lean into those. And people are really uncomfortable. A lot of what I do is just help people how to have hard, uncomfortable conversations.
And this is the concept of really the peacekeeper, of just giving control away in order not to offend or not to step on anyone's toes. And I'll get your coffee for you. I'll do anything I can.
Yeah, pussy
and you
is,
just don't
pussy is
show
like
up.
slow death. Like if you're in a relationship with someone that's extreme in that quadrant, it's just a really slow, painful death. And it's every bit as destructive as the other guys because you're not there. You're demanding someone else take responsibility for your life and your relationship. You're just in utter deference and submission. And so we really want to name that too. Like we don't want men to be submissive and subservient. We don't want that. We don't want passivity. We want empowered, assertive men. So yeah, there's just all sorts of dynamics in there that get played out.
Guys, this has been such a great conversation and I cannot wait to finish this book. And I'm sure Nathan's going to be taking my copy.
Right on your heels,
Yeah. But what I would love to know to round out this conversation, maybe one top tip from each of you, if there was one thing that men in particular could put some time, money, or energy into mastering to help them have a better relationship, what would it be?
I love that question. I think men need to learn to slow the fuck down, stop with the distractions, stop with substances, slow down on substances, and just learn to feel. Just slow down and pay attention to what they're actually experiencing inside. How am I really doing right now? And just take an honest account of that question. What's really happening inside right now? That would be my answer. And that's really my passion too.
I would answer the question and say that, and this was my passion in this book, in this process, is to help men. I would want men and women and people and couples and institutions and everything else to understand what are our priorities and when. And what I mean by that is we sometimes make ourselves the priority and sometimes we make others the priority, and that's fine. And sometimes we care a lot and sometimes we don't, and that's fine. But just understand where you apply those priorities, how that translates into relationships and interactions with other people. Because it doesn't have to be the same all the time. You can have compartmentalized situations. We understand that. But understand when it's important to look out for yourself and when it's important to look out for your family or your friends or your relationships or your company or whatever it is you got. And be able to slow down a bit, apply a little bit of common sense, and just make a conscious choice of what your priorities are and why.
Love that.
Guys, thank you so much. To say thank you for joining us today, we've made a contribution to Microloans Australia, who run some projects in Malawi, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. And basically, they run this microloan project where they lend money out so that people can start either getting some training in things like bookkeeping or microloans to start corner stores and businesses. And that has an incredible ripple effect, not just to their community, but to their country. So we want to say thank you so much for allowing us to do that. And we really appreciate you coming on to share so that we can help the listeners of our show, but also make that go even further. So thank you so much for making that possible.
That's very cool. Thank you.
No worries. So David and Corey, if people want to connect with you or want to get your book or learn a little bit more about what you both do, how should they do that?
BeLessDickish.com.
Yeah, I would say, we have other ways. You can find me on Twitter at Corey Kilpack, but the best way is to go to www.BeLessDickish.com, and all of the resources and bios are there. There's samples of the audiobook there, and also we've included the charts and some of the graphics that you're seeing in the book, Sammy. Everything's available there if you want to look at those while you're going through the audio. BeLessDickish.com.
Thanks,
Amazing.
guys. I haven't even finished it and I'm already happy to give my stamp of approval. Go get it.
Yeah, and it's on Amazon and Audible.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, guys.
You guys
Thank
were really
you.
fun. Thank you for having us.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.